Going to the movies in the 1980s in America was an experience. It was not just watching a film, it was an event, a ritual, a social gathering. Movie theaters were where you spent Friday nights and Saturday afternoons, where first dates happened, and where summer blockbusters created shared cultural moments. The 1980s were a golden age for moviegoing. The blockbusters were legendary. E.T., Star Wars sequels, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, The Goonies, Ghostbusters, and The Breakfast Club. The decade produced films that defined a generation. But beyond the films themselves, the experience of going to the theater was different. The buildings were older, the technology was simpler, social norms were looser. Let's walk through what going to the movies was actually like in the 1980s in America. Let's step into that world. The movie theater in the 1980s was usually a single-screen or small multi-screen building. They were not the massive multiplexes that would dominate the 1990s. Many theaters were older buildings from the 1950s or the 1960s, often with Art Deco architecture. Marquees with changeable letters spelled out the current feature. The box office was a window at the front. You would wait in line outside, approach the window, and tell the person what movie you wanted and how many tickets. They would tear tickets from a roll and take your cash. Credit cards were not commonly used for movie tickets yet. The lobby had a concession stand. Popcorn, candy, and soda were on the counter. The prices were already expensive. $3 or $4 for popcorn when movie tickets cost $5. The smell of buttered popcorn filled the lobby. That smell is what people remember most. You could smoke in the lobby. Ashtrays sat on stands throughout the space. People smoked while waiting for the movie to start. The smell of smoke mixed with popcorn. The walls had posters for coming attractions. You would study them while waiting, deciding what to see next. Movie marketing was different. The poster and television commercials were all you had. There were no internet trailers or reviews. Walking into the theater meant presenting your ticket to an usher. Often the usher was a teenager in a uniform, wearing a vest and a bow tie, carrying a flashlight. The usher would tear your ticket, hand you the stub, and direct you to your theater. The theaters themselves were different from modern cinemas. The floors sloped downward toward the screen, but not steeply. There was no stadium seating. If a tall person sat in front of you, your view could be blocked, and people often moved seats to find better sightlines. The seats were old, fabric-covered, often worn and stained. The cushioning was thin. The seats folded up when you stood, and some squeaked when you sat down. Comfort was not a priority. The floors were sticky. Decades of spilled soda and dropped candy left a surface that grabbed at your shoes. You could hear the sound of shoes sticking and then coming free with every step. Everyone accepted this as normal. Sticky theater floors were just how it was. The curtain was a big deal. Before the movie started, a curtain covered the screen. When the lights dimmed, the curtain would open, sometimes dramatically with motor sounds. The curtain opening meant the movie was about to start. It created anticipation. Smoking was allowed in many theaters through the mid-1980s. People would light up during the movie. The smoke would drift upward through the projector beam, visible as wisps in the light. Some theaters had smoking and non-smoking sections, but the smoke went everywhere anyway. The crowd was different. People talked during movies, not whispered. They talked at normal volume. Someone would make a joke and others would laugh. People would yell at the screen. The audience participation was accepted. Going to the movies was a communal experience, not a silent one. Teenagers would goof around, throwing popcorn, making out in the back rows. The usher would shine a flashlight on troublemakers as a warning. If they did not stop, the usher would eject them. Before the movie, there were previews called coming attractions, usually 3 or 4 trailers. The previews were longer, and they told more of the plot than modern trailers. The voiceover guy with the deep voice said, "In a world..." When the film began, there were no studio logos and no production company montages, just the film. Opening credits happened during the first scenes. You watched the movie while names scrolled by. Projection was celluloid, actual film running through a projector in the booth above the theater. Sometimes the film would break, the image would stutter and melt on screen. The lights would come on, the audience would boo and complain, the projectionist would splice the film back together, and you would wait 10 or 15 minutes. Then the movie would resume. The sound was mono or basic stereo, nothing like modern surround sound. Dialogue came from speakers behind the screen. The quality was decent, but not immersive. For big movies, there were lines. Star Wars: Return of the Jedi in 1983 had lines around the block. E.T. in 1982 was impossible to get into on opening weekend. You would wait in line for an hour, hope the show did not sell out, and finally get in. Movies stayed in theaters for months. A successful film would run for 12 weeks or more. You would have multiple chances to see it. Going back to see the same movie multiple times was common. People saw E.T. 5 or 6 times in theaters because there was no home video yet. The second-run theater was a 1980s institution. They were cheaper theaters that showed movies after they left first-run theaters. You would pay $2 or $3 to see a movie that came out months earlier. Dating at the movies was standard. The theater was where you took someone for a first date. You would sit together in the dark, sometimes holding hands, sometimes putting your arm around the other person during a scary part. The back rows were for couples who wanted to make out more than watch the movie. Families went to movies together. Saturday afternoon, matinees were for kids. Parents would drop off children at the theater for a few hours. The kids would watch the movie and then catch another showing if they wanted. The snacks were different. Popcorn came in paper bags or cardboard boxes, not plastic tubs. The butter was real butter, pumped from a dispenser. It soaked through the bag. The popcorn was saltier and greasier than today's version. Candy came from the concession stand, or you would sneak it in from outside. Sneaking candy was common. You would buy candy at the drugstore for less money and hide it in your jacket. Soda came in cups without lids. You would carry your drink carefully to avoid spilling. Free refills did not exist. Once your drink was empty, you were done. The bathroom situation was inconvenient. If you left during the movie, you would miss part. No pausing, no rewatching. You would hold it or risk missing crucial scenes. Kids' behavior was different. Parents let children be louder. Kids would talk, ask questions, get up and run around. The tolerance for noise was higher. The theater was not expected to be silent. Drive-in theaters were still around in the 1980s, but they were declining. You would drive to an outdoor lot, park facing a giant screen, and hang a speaker on your car window. You would watch the movie from your car. Families would bring pillows and snacks. Drive-ins were dying, but still existed. The movie ratings were simpler, just G, PG, PG-13, R, and X. PG-13 was introduced in 1984. The ratings were enforced loosely. Teenagers could often sneak into R-rated movies. The ticket seller at the box office did not check identification carefully. Horror movies played at midnight. The midnight movie became a tradition, with cult films and horror running on weekends at midnight. Films like Rocky Horror Picture Show and Evil Dead became staples. Midnight horror double features were common. The midnight crowd was rowdy and participatory. Movie prices were cheaper but still significant. A ticket cost $4 to $6 depending on location and whether it was a matinee. For teenagers making minimum wage, $3 per hour, a movie was expensive. The summer blockbuster was a 1980s phenomenon. Memorial Day weekend launched the summer movie season. Studios would release their biggest films, Indiana Jones, Star Trek, and Batman. Summer movies created cultural events. Everyone saw them, everyone talked about them. VHS changed everything in the mid-1980s. Home video meant movies would eventually come to your house, but there was a significant delay. There was a gap of 6 months to a year between theatrical release and home video. The theater remained the first and best way to see new movies. What defined 1980s moviegoing was the communal nature. Going to the movies meant being with other people, sharing reactions, laughing together, gasping at the same moments. The collective experience created memories. The limitations made it special. You couldn't pause. You couldn't rewind. You couldn't look up what you missed on your phone. You were present, focused, experiencing the movie as it happened. The theaters themselves had character, old buildings with history, quirks and imperfections, the sticky floors, squeaky seats, temperamental projection, all part of the experience. For people who went to movies in the 1980s, the memories are specific. The smell of popcorn and cigarettes, the sound of the curtain opening, the feeling of the sticky floor, the excitement of seeing Star Wars or E.T. or Back to the Future with a crowd of people all experiencing it together. The 1980s movie theater represented something that is largely gone. It was a time when going to the movies was an event, not just content consumption. Theaters were community spaces. Watching a film meant being present with others in a shared experience. For those who experienced 1980s theaters, the nostalgia is real. Not because the theaters were objectively better, they were not. The experience was different in ways that mattered. The movies were not just entertainment, they were events. The theaters were where those events happened.